Hey-la, and welcome to Coffee with Avila. I'm Aviana Lemaire, and on this channel we discuss neurodivergence and greater living. So this is a continuation in this video of me being asked in the comment section of a previous video what my thoughts are on reality transurfing, kind of from an indie perspective, trying to understand what the instructions are in the book or what you are supposed to be getting at in order to achieve what's in the book. And I have made it now through 8 total chapters. And I'm finding that there's a lot of repetition about general overarching ideals and a theory of what you're supposed to be doing. Well, no, a theory of what you're not supposed to be doing and a theoretical reference to what you are supposed to be doing, but no instructions that I'm seeing. Nothing sort of palpable about how to work this into a normal or reasonable situation in daily life. Before I get into this, well, actually, to continue that point, because there's a lot of repetition, right? It's huge repetition. So what's happened is I'm listening to it. It's going over and over and over and over. And when I'm not engaged, I think. And with enough repetition, especially if something I already get the concept of, I'm already familiar with, I think I'm kind of familiar with the concepts that this book seems based on. So when I'm not engaged at all, I think. And with all the repetition and some of the repeated, what are they, metaphors, and then every now and then slightly new metaphors, I started to realize there's a very clear and obvious way to explain what this book seems to be suggesting emotionally, because these images started to form in my mind, and I realized there's a direct connection with Star Trek canon here. My best grasp on what is being suggested for people in this book seems like it lines up perfectly with the Vulcan storyline. Throughout the history of Star Trek, they tell different parts of the Vulcan history, and it's not as cut and dry as it seems, because a lot of people think they are emotionless, and they are very much not, which is a part of their history, and it's why they contain their emotions the way that they do now. So this book is coming from the perspective of assuming that everyone is completely out of control of their emotions, and that they are emotion forward, first of all, and or completely out of control of their emotions and just creating all these different vortexes of doom, basically accessing vortexes of doom and the wrong, what's the word, parallel reality, because they're in an uncontrolled emotional state. I will say something. 2 really important points here. Thing 1, not everyone is going to need this. I made a previous video addressing this and how it's different for autistic individuals. Hold on, I'm looking around for a remote because now I've got an electronic doing something weird that's very distracting. Okay, so I need to turn that off. There, in the previous video, I was talking about the fact that autists are not emotion forward beings. So all of the emphasis that's being put in reality transurfing as a book or a method on containing your emotions, we kind of already have a jump on that and a leg on that. Unless we are very unwell, if we've been through a lot of trauma, if we cannot contain ourselves for some very specific reason, we don't tend to be out of control of our emotions in general. This is one of those things that people notice about us, and when they do not and or cannot understand us, actually, if anything, they tend to see us kind of like inside of the Star Trek series when people meet Vulcans and they are extremely contained and quiet and don't like to show their emotions on their face or use terminology that's extremely emotional, then generally what happens is emotional species, races, which would be the proper use of the term, emotional races like humans, because overall, as a people, we are known for our emotions much more than the Vulcans are. We're known for them showing, especially the very vocal, I could say majority, but I'm not sure if that's true. What happens in the program is that human beings meet Vulcans, and because humans greatly are trained to communicate through emotional language and subtext, it is insanely frustrating for them to run into a Vulcan who is trained never to communicate through emotions and emotional subtext. So I think it's really fascinating. Point number 1, as autists, that's not usually how we work. For people who are allistic, aka not autistic, this is probably a really good approach, because generally allists are emotion forward beings, and it's just a different thing. So having something that helps you to rein in your emotions, if you've never thought about that before, or if you haven't found a method that helps, something like, not necessarily this book, but the concepts referenced in this book, where you have to kind of control that. So you're in control of what you do, and you're in control of your emotions and their effect on your life, rather than having them control you and the effect on your life. That's a really good thing. We don't necessarily need that as autists, but again, if there's stuff going on, we could. And it's one of those things, the tradition of the difference between a poison and a medicine very often is the dose, or for that matter, to whom you give it. So if it's the right dosage for you and you're the right person for it, that as a concept could work. But I'm thinking about the Vulcans greatly because, let me see, there are a lot of people who are already going to greatly know about this and understand the complete history. I wish I'd said this earlier, but I didn't. Whatever. If you're meant to watch the video, I'm sure you clicked to this spot or you're still watching. I'm going to explain a little bit about it so that people who do not watch the series and aren't familiar with the entire franchise will get a concept. Thing one. It seems that it's a very common misconception that Vulcans don't have emotions. Not only do they have emotions, they have a history that at some point was referenced as being very similar to humans. Because at some point, if you go far enough back in Vulcan history, before what's technically shown on the series, but it is referenced in some of the iterations of Star Trek, Vulcans were emotional to the point where they were destroying each other and everything. Apparently there were wars, and they were very violent wars. They would solve everything with fights. It was horrifying and destructive. My take on what I'm remembering about it, because it's been a while since I heard this, but I found it very fascinating, so I remember it because I've been a trekker all of my life. I found it very fascinating when I heard it, so I remember the points. They used to be so out of control of everything and so violent and creating constant chaos, which kind of parallels with what this book is saying, out of control of your emotions, tapping into the chaotic, destructive reality. So that's what the Vulcans were like, and that's what their world was like. Then all of a sudden, through a series of events, quite famously, if I'm remembering the name correctly, because I'm often confusing it with another Vulcan that popped up on the show, but I believe the teachings of Surak specifically came along at a time when they desperately needed it, and it helped a lot of them change, basically. It was a series of very rigorous teachings that involved things like regular daily meditation, teachings when you're a child, so that you are kind of born into a society that gives you the building blocks to build yourself, your life throughout childhood, adolescence, adulthood, so that you know how to close yourself off to your emotions enough that they no longer control you. Now, the thing about this that is very important is that there are two sects of Vulcans, and this was mentioned in a particular iteration of Star Trek. I don't know that it was mentioned outside of Star Trek Enterprise, but there's an episode in Star Trek Enterprise where we meet some Vulcans who smile and laugh and do all these things people don't think they do. And it was just weird for people. They're like, "What's up with you? I don't get why you're doing this." Long story short, there are different iterations of how to translate Surak's teachings, right? So in this book, it sounds a whole lot like it's saying you need to follow that Vulcan mindset. I just kept picturing the Vulcans who are very well known for not showing the emotion, where people look at them and think they don't have any emotions. And they actually often find a great distaste for that type of showing of emotions. And quite frankly, it makes sense that they would find it distasteful, because they know what they themselves have been like when they were completely out of control, and it was horrible and it was highly distasteful. So it kind of explains why they would be so disgusted to see it everywhere else. They know that growing past that was a part of their own personal evolution into theoretically better behavior. And so when they see it elsewhere, it kind of must be triggering basically a genetic wound of what they've done to each other and what they've done to themselves. And also, it's probably just making them think, well, you must be rather unevolved, because in their minds, they would probably think evolution just naturally leads to a place where you purge your emotions and you don't show them, or you show them less. Whereas for other races, they don't care. The emotions are greatly celebrated. But the important thing is, this could be one of those things where, again, if it's the right medicine for you, it could work. Because if your emotions are controlling your life and you're constantly just losing it and getting locked in a horrible, upset place, or you're having outbursts and it's harming relationships, and I'm not talking about something like a meltdown, because this is how our brains work, and that is touchy enough territory to kind of work through. I don't want anybody to think that I'm referencing a meltdown as some type of emotional outburst, because what that is for us, honestly, is more like a pressure relief valve. It's not just we had a feeling and we instantly threw it everywhere like some kind of emotional diarrhea, which is one heck of a thought. But it's really much more just like, we've had enough. There was something here, there was too much there was way too much over there, and it's finally gotten to the point where, like a cartoon, we're just so filled with red pressure and steam and stuff, there's no other place to contain it. It starts coming out the ears or mouth or whatever. That's the meltdown. Something has got to break at that point. It's not the same as just getting triggered emotionally and flying off the handle about every little thing. That's what only happens to us as autists. When every huge thing has been contained within us and there is no space left inside for all those explosions to go off and harm just us and only cannibalize us, but now the energy has to escape because it's just done too much damage here and now it wants to eat something else, basically. That's just being pushed way over the edge. So I want to be clear, because I don't even want to suggest that I'm saying some of the things that some of us have heard that have been harmful. That's not the same thing, and I'm not talking about a meltdown, but we know, I think some of us, when we're having a situation where you've been harmed, you've gone through something, maybe you get to a place where you just have nasty feelings about a situation or a person, there's a different place. We have the emotions. They function differently. If this is the right suggestion for you and you need to calm the emotions down for real, then what he's talking about in reality transurfing, where it sounds like the traditional Vulcan approach of shielding your emotions and not showing them because they are distasteful, that could work. For a lot of people, that could very much work, especially if you're a person who's very emotionally led. But I think I said that already. I've had to record this video for the second time, so I can't remember anymore. If you're very emotionally led and emotion forward, if you're holistic, and that's how allists tend to work, is emotion first, logic second. And so your personal challenge in life has a tendency to be to get that logic to fully work in tandem with the emotion so that the emotion is no longer in control. For us as autists, it's the very opposite experience. And that has been my experience too. I am autistic, where we are logic forward and emotion behind. So my experiences in life were more like trying to get to a place where I could balance the emotions and the logic in specific areas in specific ways. Sometimes that's what it is. It's just trying to bring it into a healthy, it's kind of recognizing the duality and helping them to meld so that they function together, you know, like the yin-yang thing. Come together and you achieve a new level of something that you couldn't have achieved with just the emotions in front or with just the logic in front. Now, what's fascinating is, and we get to the Vulcans where they took a different approach. And they will laugh, and they will smile, and they will joke, and they will do all these different things that show emotion. And they just have a different take. Now, inside of Star Trek history, that's very interesting, because just as a small mention, the Vulcans who do hide all of their emotions find those Vulcans who don't hide those emotions, at a certain point in their history, they found them to be very distasteful also, almost as if they had completely destroyed the meanings of Surok's teachings. Now they're living in peace too, but the other Vulcans believe that they've just done it in the correct way, and there's not really any room in their doctrine of belief for doing it differently. But these other people ended up kind of going off into their own sect, the other Vulcans, and they kind of had to hide because they were not appreciated and they were considered to be distasteful. So, yeah, that goes into a deeper part of the story, but when they went off and they hid, in a way, they had a bit of freedom that they didn't have when they were being watched by these other people who disagreed with their translation of the teachings. They had some freedom to just live a different iteration of it. And they still do not go into that old Vulcan history of being completely out of control of their emotions and attacking each other. It's not like they're warring amongst themselves and proving that their translation is wrong. It's just that they're doing it differently. So that could be a good approach for some people too. For instance, in my life, one of my particular challenges, which isn't necessarily an autistic thing, it's very much a personal thing, a personality thing, a spiritual thing. I have never tried to squash my emotions. There was trauma in my life that wanted me to hide everything that was a gift, and that was a part of it. My emotions have been a wonderful boon to me for mental health, for relating to others, for understanding the world, for experiencing joy, for processing things. And processing things was very important to me. So if you're a person who's not feeling like your emotions are, if you know that you're not in that place where you need to rein them in and push them back like the traditional Vulcans, but you just want to live in a place where you can control your mind and you're not thinking, what do they call them? They call it catastrophizing. Is that how you pronounce it? It feels ridiculous coming out of my mouth. That is the traditional description. I don't really like that description because it tends to be used as though you're making things worse than they are or making mountains out of molehills. So I'm just going to give a small spiritual acknowledgement to people who have been through, as have I, have been through things. And you're not making mountains out of molehills. You've been through the mountains and you've had to scale them. And so now you're concerned about them because you learned the hard way that they were there. That was my experience. I didn't know about the stuff that I would be afraid of in life until I was shocked and surprised by experiencing unthinkable things. Now, this is where having the emotions in line has helped me to heal. Being able to cry, being able to, in private moments when I had the capacity to be in private moments, when I could be someplace private, to cry, to yell, to pray, to scream to the heavens, to scream out loud, to process everything, to say all of the things that I couldn't say if anyone was there listening, to just get it all out and purge that stuff. Those emotions were profoundly helpful and healing to me, and they still are. It's been an amazing gift. I'm very thankful for them. If I had to be a Vulcan and I had to choose which sect, I wouldn't go with the surprise, surprise. I know myself, so it's not a surprise to me. If you knew me like that, you would know it's not a surprise that I wouldn't go with the main sect and want to do it in the traditional way, where you just wipe your emotions in order to fit in. I've kind of lived that life already, quite frankly, and it was something I don't regret because I did it to survive. But if I had the choice, I would be the person, which I'm also doing now, who's in control of it so that I'm not seeing mountains everywhere. Because once you learn that there are mountains everywhere, the next time, you're just looking at the ground and you just look up enough to see the base of a molehill beginning, you see a slight curve in the dirt and you might just be terrified to lift your eyes anymore in case it's yet another horrendous mountain, right? Kind of like pattern recognition. Our brains learn patterns. Some of us are afraid of what's going to come, or we're upset, or we're complaining because we've already seen what for us was the worst. We've seen what for us broke us. We have reason not to just suspect that something horrible could happen, but to know and remember, and we're healing deep cellular wounds. Even science, modern science, medical science is recognizing this concept that things are stored inside of your cells. It's long since been referenced about disease. The last time I heard about something that seemed, they kind of edge closer to what the spiritual crowd has always known. We know that there is memory that comes down throughout generations. Some of us, even as peoples across the globe, have been through stuff where it just seems to keep affecting generation after generation after generation, like we've been programmed. Well, because we have. And now they call this epigenetics. They're starting to discover and admit to some of the things. It just takes them a really slow way around. I love science. It's just that I love it in its place, and it can't do for me what spiritual knowledge can do, what gnosis can do, what study can do, what all of the things that people have known since the beginning of time because of the scientific method. Actually, you see it happen, and then you see if the events can be recreated, and when they are, you know, okay, this is reliable, I'm going to go with that. That's what we use as spiritualists. We've known this forever, and now it's getting to the point where people are talking about this stuff, and it becomes news, and then it just becomes regular reference. Now people just know it's epigenetics. It's something that happened a while back, and it's like it's still happening somewhere inside of your cells because you hold the memory from what happened. Excuse me, trying not to hiccup. You hold the memory for what happened from previous generations. So in some situations like that, taking a more Vulcan approach could actually help. Whether it's, extreme containment, if that's the level of medicine you need, or less containment that just keeps you in a place where you are a constantly functioning recognition of the duality of being emotionally capable and intellectually capable. So your brain and your heart can work together, interlock, and just function in that way. And I think if you take it from that perspective, or something like that works for you, especially anyone who already knows about the Vulcan stuff, this could really work for you. I'll tell you, one of the reasons why this occurred to me is that in my own life, long before I encountered the concept of this book, and I guess before it was written, I basically studied everything. And I loved Star Trek, so I would see a lot of similarities in the way that they show things on the program and the way a lot of people take an approach to life. And some people do this thing where we're going to shut down that, we're going to just not react emotionally. The more you can hold yourself back emotionally, the better. That's good medicine for somebody who needs it. Again, for me, it's the opposite of what I needed because I wasn't the right person and it wasn't the proper dosage or the proper medicine. It actually turned into a poison, and that's how it works. So again, if that's what you need, this could be great. But over those years, when I was having a moment when I would remember the stuff that was programmed into my cells and it would send me into a tizzy, I'm trying to think good thoughts, I'm trying to process, I'm trying to focus on what I want, I'm trying to avoid being overwhelmed and spiraling into the memories and the terrible stuff that happened. And being able to control your mind in a healthy way is a good part of being able to manifest, or being able to reality shift, or whatever we want to call it. I would say to myself just this one thing, and it's one word, and it's the name of a particular Vulcan that turned up in Star Trek Voyager. And there was a scene where this particular Vulcan was working on something. Everything was hitting the fan. Everyone was panicking or upset, and it got worse and worse as time went by, and everyone was doing their best to take their knowledge and their ability to help the situation and make the threat to everyone's life go down. But the threat was not going away. It seemed to be increasing. So they were just trying to remain. It's Starfleet. It's Starfleet training. You're trying to just use your knowledge and get yourself out of the situation. This is exactly what you were trained for. And the Vulcan in question was named Tuvok. At some point, someone became very upset and had an emotional outburst. Now, right unto itself, this proves where the Vulcan approach can be useful, because in that moment, the person was not helping or saving anyone's life, and time was running out. So now they had to be calmed down, and it was distracting someone who did have the skill and knowledge to keep it together and help actually functionally save people's lives. But in that moment, they had an emotional breakdown, and they were basically saying, you don't care, mistranslating his culture, not taking it into account, and thinking that because he was very calm and had a calm artifice, or whatever the word is, that seems like the right one, that he just didn't care. He's dead inside. So it was like insults flying, accusation. And he basically being Vulcan, he didn't get caught up in it emotionally, and he didn't turn it into a fight or an argument. He just maintained control of the situation, because in that moment he's the only one who was in control of anything. And so he said to them, basically, to summate, or he asked, would it help the situation if I were to become emotionally out of control right now? And it was a small moment. I don't remember how the person reacted, but it was just a small moment where I thought, it's interesting, because you hear this a lot in the program, but in that moment I was thinking about it differently. Generally, what's going on with the Vulcans in these situations, it happens a lot. Someone sees them looking calm and they think, you're heartless, you're cold, you don't care. Somebody just died, you're not responding, you don't care. Or someone is going to and you're not responding, you must not care. So they're losing it because they can't control their own reaction. But what's going on in that situation is always that the Vulcan is going to be the person who is going to be able to maintain control. They can remember their training. They can remember the scientific knowledge that they have. They can keep control of themselves. Tuvok was insecurity, but in Starfleet, people had a tendency to have a level of knowledge about everything conceivable that would actually kind of shock me. You might have, rarely, but you might have a medical person who knows something about engineering or something. It kind of makes sense, because you need to be able to do things other than just stand in one place and do one job. So in this situation, a lot of what Tuvok was doing seemed to be involving technological stuff. I'm getting off into it because I'm a fan of the program, and in my mind this is all linked and connected because it's part of the story. But to quickly summate, he's busy doing other things and using his whole body of knowledge, communicating with other Starfleet officers and everyone who's there, and then has to stop for a minute because someone's having an emotional outburst, where if that had been another Vulcan, that wouldn't really have been the case. They can interact in tetchy ways, but they also can generally remain focused on the task at hand. And sometimes in moments in my own life, for a great amount of time, when I've been trying to process that I need to remain calm, but I don't feel calm because, I have memories and I'm scared of stuff, I'll just take a moment and I will close my eyes and I will say to myself, Tuvok. It's like a trigger for my mind to remember that in this moment, no matter what is taking place, even if it's something stressful or scary, me losing control of my emotions is not going to make the situation better. Me losing control of my thoughts and thinking that the worst is going to happen and being terrified and having some kind of PTSD or CPTSD episode, it's not going to be helpful. So if I can avoid that stuff, I'm always working on avoiding it. It's not something that plagues me, thankfully. There have been moments, but it's not something that plagues me. And I find that if you can head the thoughts off that take you to that pace, that take you to that place, before they just start to escalate and get out of control, it's much better than realizing that you're already in a panic and trying to calm yourself down from there. So I will take a moment and I will say Tuvok, and it kind of says to me, is my panic in this moment going to help this situation get any better, or is it going to help it get any worse? And the truth is, for me and my experience, at least in the moment, it's only going to make it worse. So I take that Vulcan approach, and I remember Tuvok saying these things, and it's just an instruction to me to take a moment. What works for me is to breathe, to do deep breaths. Not like the breaths by themselves don't do all of the magic, but I tend to take a deep breath because sometimes you hold tension from bad memories and experiences in the body. Sometimes I will take my focus, and this is what's very important, do something to take your focus off of what is escalating the bad sensations, the bad thoughts, the potential for spiraling, whatever it is that is deeply traumatic. You need to do what you can, because sometimes it's not that easy, but do what you can that is safe to redirect your thoughts to things that are also safe, things that are peaceful, things that relieve tension. So for me, something that I used to do all of the time was turn on my music and start listening to whatever it is that I knew in that moment was going to help me. Sometimes I needed something to match the energy, so it's loud and You know, it might be loud metal. Sometimes I needed something to kind of chillax me and just make me think about a completely different thing. So it might be a softer, like a classic pop thing I love, like been a Mariah Carey fan. I've been a Mariah fan a long time. So I might pop in a specific song of hers. I have some songs that will just get me into a different mood immediately. And one particular one, I realized I can't listen to this song and still be mad. I hit play on that and I just cannot be angry anymore. It works every time. But I choose something safe in that moment, something else to think about. If it's a moment where I can sing a little song to myself, or I can calm myself and just repeat a prayer, it's kind of like the technique of just, there's a type of meditation where you just let everything come, and then there's a type where you kind of calmly redirect your thoughts into a more peaceful area, into a more contained area, something to help you calm. And it seems like if you're going to take an approach that, you know, this is all inspired by trying to understand what is supposed to be being suggested inside of the book, Reality Transurfing, but really, for me, it's just trying to figure out what he's referencing. It always sounds like he's referencing this greater, grander concept from other cultures where people have known these things and lived in them forever. So I start thinking about that. And there are so many of them that I can't pinpoint any one particular thing, because it's like it's an amalgam that's being quietly referenced. But as soon as the Vulcan thing popped into my head, I was just completely tickled, and I was like, this is how I explain it. Somebody's going to understand this. Somebody's gonna love it. I know it. There's got to be a reason why it occurred to me, and it's because someone's gonna get it because of that. So if this is a confusing aspect for you of this particular book and this particular method, when he's talking about how to ride the wave of fortune, or how to do the thing and have the emotional reaction that chooses the reality you desire or you prefer, rather than the one that you do not desire and that you don't prefer, just take it like a Vulcan and move on. Because whether you decide in that moment that you need to really lock down those emotions and simply contain yourself and shift hard into full logical thinking, or you decide, okay, I just need to remember myself in this moment and I enjoy being balanced, so I'm going to just take the emotions that are triggered and I'm going to key into that, especially that neurodivergent capability we have of having such a completely different approach to what people expect, or what people generally, other people can understand. Just take that moment, have those emotions, and at the same time have my logic kick back in. And I do this as an ADHDer who's autistic and ADHD. So I'm autistic, I'm logic forward. End of story. Logic forward, emotion second, but I'm also the autistic ADHDer, and the ADHD side of me comes with that emotional regulation thing, where I found in my life it's always been a gift for me that I can have moments. I'm just blessed. I know a lot of people have challenges with the emotions, and I've never had a legitimate challenge with my emotions. It's been stuff that came from trauma, and it hit me, and I had to learn to heal. But my nature, and where I am again now, except with a lot more knowledge and a lot more power after all of this, is to have both of them in conjunction. The emotional regulation thing, where sometimes I just really have to vent. Sometimes I have to really cry right now. Sometimes I just have to express in a safe place with a safe person all the things I'm thinking about somebody else in a very uncensored way, where it just does not sound polite at all. But I get those emotions out, and then I come back to balance, per se. I come back to center. And then I have my emotions and my intellect just working properly. And it's kind of just always about that. It's about finding the place where you can do that best and where it's most natural for you. So I don't think there's anything else to really say about this right now. So I'm going to see if I can just slide myself out of the video. Okay, here's my outro. Finally got it, so I'm prepped by the end of the video. Have any thoughts or questions? Share them in the comments. And this is all in a pinned comment underneath. I just pin it now. If it's not there, I intend to have it, but nonetheless, so you can go look and remember what I said if you give a flip. And if you don't look. Have any thoughts or questions? Share them in the comments. Notice any gaps in the autistic, ADHD, or ADHD community conversation? Want a spiritually, mystically inclusive ND voice on a subject? Just looking for an extra opinion or viewpoint? Share your suggestions in the comments. If I can address them, I might make them into a video. Remember to like, share, subscribe, ring the notification bell for all my newest updates, and be blessed. Peace and long life. And I think am I using the wrong side? I can't remember anymore. I'm doing all those, I can't even remember. What's the Vulcan sign? That's so embarrassing, I'm gonna have to look it up. If I weren't under pressure doing the video, I'd remember. It's gonna be so ridiculous when I'm editing this later. Awesome. I hope I cut this out, but every time I say that I don't because I think it might be funny. Anyway, peace and long life. And most people will say live long and prosper, but I happen to notice that when you're watching a program and two people who know the greeting are near each other, what usually ends up happening, that's what it is, I got it now. What usually ends up happening is that the initiative or initiator, what is the word? The person who initiates it says peace and long life first, and the response from the other party back to them is then live long and prosper. And yeah, I'm for reunification.